Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast where, when you're a terminally ill teen, sure, you could accept the much-needed love and support and attention of your loving boyfriend, but wouldn't it be simpler to just break up with him and die alone and in pain? Book number 12, When Love Dies.
What terrible secret is Trisha keeping from Steven?
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Marissa Blacksbart, and with me today is my friend, Katie LaDue. Welcome, Katie.
Hi.
Katie and I are friends from graduate school. We're both masters.
Can I say, first time caller, long time listener?
You did say that. I love it when people say that. We're here today to talk about book number 12, When Love Dies.
I do love, a good tragic love story. Love my Titanic and Atonement and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that this particular book, When Love Dies, right up there with Titanic, Atonement, right below, just a close third.
Oh, critically, quality-wise, yes, definitely. That's exactly what I meant when I said those two things.
This was your first Sweet Valley High novel, correct?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Now, you are, of all of my friends, probably the biggest expert in TV shows of all time, but especially teen drama type things is really your bread and butter, I feel like.
It is my life's passion.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant to say. It's your life's passion.
Yes.
So, did you ever watch the Sweet Valley High TV series?
I think that was a little before my time. I'm not even exactly sure when that was on, but I think it was a little before, because I don't remember it being on.
Well, someday, many years from now, I will be all the way through all of these Sweet Valley High novels, and I'll have many choices of where to go. Sweet Valley University, Sweet Valley Twins, but maybe we could watch the TV show. So let's start out right off the bat. Let's talk a little bit about the cover of book number 12, When Love Dies.
I just want to say that I didn't really look at the cover before I read it, and only looked at the cover afterwards. And the cover has Trisha and Steven on it, and I just, based on what I read in the descriptions, I did not anticipate this is what Trisha looked like. So
we're talking Stephen Wakefield, the Wakefield twins' very handsome older brother, carbon copy of Ned Wakefield, only a little bit younger, not blonde, because the mom is blonde, the girls are blonde, dad is brunette, son has to be brunette.
It happens.
It absolutely happens.
But this just just even distribution of that.
I think but this is sort of like the Ken and Barbie school of mom and dad, where
he does very much look like a Ken doll on the cover.
He does.
Yeah.
He's got a nice jaw. His
just like a jawline that could cut head. Glass,
Yeah. And Trisha Martin, his girlfriend, who in the last book we had learned she was being very standoffish. She wasn't answering his calls and stuff. And in this book she's wearing a ridiculous blouse.
I thought it was maybe even a nightgown from the early turn of the century era.
Lacy, poofy. She does have strawberry blonde hair.
On the cover, it looks like she's a straight-up redhead.
Yeah, you're right. The book often describes Trisha Martin using two words. I looked it up. I read the Kindle edition of this book, which is nice because it meant that I could do a global search to see how many times Trisha was referred to as sweet and delicate. And the number was three times.
Did you say porcelain-like, I think, at one point?
She was very
porcelain
pale.
Doll-like.
She's Trisha is bony like a bird and defenseless all the time. And Stephen, when he thinks longingly of her, thinks primarily of his desire to protect her from the world, because a sweet and delicate creature like Trisha needs to be protected.
I mean, no other male character in a teen drama has ever had a white knight syndrome. That's never a thing that happens.
Well, so I think that's all. All that's happening is Stephen is looking at the back of Trisha's head, and they're both staring off into the distance. Trisha resolutely, Stephen with a look of real confusion on his face. Trisha, what the fuck? Right?
Also, I mean, I'm just going to say this. She's got a mullet. It kind of looks like a mullet in a weird way.
Curly.
But it's just like the kind of like real short and then kind of chopped back and then long in the back, but it's like pushed back. So it kind of looks like a mullet.
You know?
In a weird way.
Listeners weigh in. Does Trisha Martin have a mullet? Shannon, I'm talking to you. Hit me up on Twitter.
I'm just not into it. I'm just not into her hair. That's the point. The point is I'm not into her hair.
No, it's not a great look, but it is very of the era, the 1980s. This book is from, I'm going to check the inside cover. It is from 1984. Man, you would have thought we'd been further into the 80s by now. 1984. Yeah. Okay, so.
But she's a good person.
She's a great person.
So it doesn't matter.
A little bit too great, as we'll find out. Too great for her own good.
Yeah, it sounds like.
So let's get into the story here. Okay. The book starts and Jessica comes home and Stephen is basically crying at the kitchen table.
And again, never read one of these books before. So all very much like first impressions of things that they're saying. I found it very odd that they make a comment about the fact that sometimes Stephen can't tell his sisters apart, which... depending on whether a lot of the listeners out there know a set of identical twins, if you do, once you, like, especially if you're very close to them, you can tell them apart. Like, I had two friends growing up, like, most of my life, they were a pair of identical twin sisters, but, like, after you got to know them, you were like, oh my God, they're totally different people. And like, they even look different to you after a while.
And that definitely applies to Elizabeth and Jessica. Like,
yeah.
They dress differently, they talk differently, they walk differently.
Just like their face, like you start being like, oh no, they are different. Like I can see it. Like just, I don't know, if you know people well enough, you can see differences.
Right.
So I thought that was very weird that they would claim, like they didn't claim it all the time, but they're like, when he gets agitated, sometimes he can't tell them apart. And I was like, no.
Well, he's definitely agitated.
Oh, that's for sure. Point. Yeah.
He's home from college, Sweet Valley College. I don't know how that's
true. I know. Yeah,
to Sweet Valley University,
and it must be very close by.
Yes, he comes home almost every weekend, partly to see his girlfriend Trisha Martin.
Yes.
Now, it must have come across to you very early, Jessica's feelings about the Martin family in general.
Yes, her feelings were like borderline hysterical to me because all of her feelings were like...
You mean like hysterical haha or hysterical like she's a totally crazy woman?
I mean, more like, here's your girl, like... ridiculous, just based on the fact that, like, the things that she says are, like, the things that, like, every dramatic, like, parent in, like, a kind of younger, like, teen-oriented thing says, and every, like, star-crossed lover story, like, all the things that a parent says to a kid about their significant other was stuff Jessica was saying to her brother. And I was like, this... Like, why is she saying these things that would normally you would only hear out of the mouth of a parent? The, like, that girl's no good.
Jessica mentions, so the problem
that kind of stuff
with the Martin family is that they're all trash.
Yeah.
And that comes up many times in this book, but Jessica also many times in this book references her concern about the Wakefield family reputation. Like she says at one point that she's the only one who cares about it.
Yeah. Well, her literal... I knew she'd turn out to be nothing but trouble. And I was like, is that a thing? A sister says to a brother about his girlfriend? Like, I feel like that's a thing a parent would say to a kid about, like, you know, your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, you know.
Yeah, somewhere in here.
I thought it was an odd reaction from a sibling, but... It became very clear to me very quickly that Jessica Wakefield is very severe and says things that are just bonkers.
We've seen this before in Jessica's reaction to Elizabeth's relationship drama. What's happening with Stephen is that he's having a hard time getting a hold of Trisha. She's not taking his calls. And she knows that they kind of have a standing date. They're not just like a casual couple. They're like in love.
Yeah.
And so he's really broken up about it. In general, sure, it's helpful to, if you have illusions about your significant other, it can be helpful to hear the truth.
Yeah.
But when you're sad about your significant other, it can also be really helpful to hear, like, you know, it's probably not as bad as you think. Like, just Jessica would never do that. She goes straight to oh, you're worried that so-and-so is cheating on you? Yeah, she's probably cheating on you. Or Steven isn't even worried that Trisha's cheating on him. In fact, he's sure that Trisha's not cheating on him.
Yeah.
But Jessica suggests that she probably is because her sister's a whore, so her sister Betsy is a slut.
Yeah, man, they slut-shamed Betsy real hard.
Yeah. So Betsy is a slut. That's Trisha's sister. I don't even like to use the word, but she's...
They said she'd be pregnant by graduation.
Oh, and their father is a famed alcoholic. So Steven actually, first off in this book, right after Elizabeth and Jessica kind of give him, like, sort of opposite sorts of advice, he rushes over to the Martins' house and, like, bangs on the door to see Trisha. And when he opens the door, he sees Mr. Martin, like, swaying back and forth with a can in his hand. They describe the book. Let me see if I
love the just, like, they're trying to let you know how just, like, bleak and horrible where she lives is. And at one point after Steven leaves Trisha's bedroom, they say she, like, flops back on the bed and looks up at the bare light bulb on the ceiling. And I was like, oh my God, such a characteristic of just bleakness.
Like, I get that you're poor, but do some arts and crafts, for God's sake.
Just like, oh God.
A bare light bulb. You can make a lampshade out of a gallon jug. That's what you do in the third world to add more light to a room when there are holes in the ceiling. You can do it too. But, okay, I have the quote here. I found it about what it looks like when Steven pulls up in chapter 2. His headlights picked up the gleam of discarded cans and broken glass that littered the weeds alongside the uneven road. He pulled to a stop in front of a shabby frame house with peeling paint. Trisha's house. As always, he experienced a pang at the thought. Sweet, lovely Trisha deserved much better than this, though he had never once heard her complain about it. So that's her horrible house that Trisha is, damsel in distress, prisoner of. And she, as, like, the only stable member of her family, her mother has died, takes care of her drunk father, who I guess probably doesn't have a job. It's a tough life for Trisha, and Steven really enjoys being the bright spot in Trisha's life. But not for long, because Trisha, who is like, I'm going out of town this weekend, Steven. I forgot to tell you. That coughs are the sound of her, her pretending that she's not sick.
Yeah, and I mean, there was one, I can't remember if it's in this moment, he makes this, oh, well, she must be going out of town
he says that to her.
Yeah, she must be going out of town for the weekend with a guy, and I was like, what high school student
I had the same thought.
Can go away with a guy for the weekend? I had
the same thought. So Jessica's in his head. He's like, oh, you're going out of town for the weekend? You met someone else. That's it, isn't it? You're going away with him for the weekend. I had the same thought, like, adults go away with their significant others for the weekends. 17-year-old girls do not go away with their new boyfriends for a weekend. No. Unless...
I mean, it's like, I guess if you'd be like, I could see people that were, like, extremely wealthy and they're like, their parents are never around and they just do whatever they want. But even still, like, at least their significant other would have to be older. They would have to, like, pay for things and do things that they couldn't do.
No, I guess never say never. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's definitely
not in this. No. And nobody I knew could have gotten away with that in high school.
Me too.
Nobody.
So pretty quickly that escalates into them kind of saying, like, Steven confronting her about having been so distant, and she's like, this is it, isn't it? And he's like, what's it? Like,
yeah.
What are you talking about? And they basically have a sort of a weird mutual breakup, like, it's better this way, but they're both super pissed off about it. And not just pissed off, but they're both, like, clearly heartbroken, but they, like,
break up anyway. Yeah.
Dating anymore because there's something that Trisha's not telling Steven, and she won't tell him. Instead, she's just like, go away.
I was certain she was pregnant. I was certain. And also, again, this just plays into, like, I'm going to say this like a million more times in this episode, which is I've seen this play out in a very similar manner on different TV shows or in different, like, teen movies when, you know, the girlfriend gets pregnant and she doesn't think the boyfriend wants to deal with it when they're in high school, that she, like, tries to break up with him. She tries to go at it alone. She tries to, whether that means like leaving town with the kid or giving it up for adoption or having an abortion without telling him. And I thought that's what's going on here.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah.
But you are disabused of this notion very quickly because right in chapter 2, suddenly we have this big perspective switch into Trisha's head. Now, this is a strange moment because later on in the book, there's a big moment when this reveal could have been kept from us and it would have been shocking.
Yeah, that's true.
What we're about to find out from Trisha. Elizabeth sees Trisha later on in the book, and we'll bring it up when we get there. But instead of holding off the suspense until the second half of the book decides to tell us what's going on, what Trisha's secret is right now. And if you will indulge me, may I do a little bit of a reading?
That's what I was going to say. I want the bluntness of this reveal out of nowhere. Just like, I want them to understand.
And I guess I kind of seriously, I was thinking about during this book, like, trigger warning if...
I guess,
or terminal illness for this whole episode.
Sure.
Trigger
warning for a lot of things.
For a lot of things, yeah. I was I would have been more sad. This seems like it should have been a very sad book.
Yeah.
But instead, it's not that sad because it's so ham-fistedly handled that it's kind of funny.
Also, they don't spend that awful much time with the story that you would deem the more important one.
Right. As you will see, listeners, when we get to how thin the story is. But maybe they just felt like they couldn't spend that much time talking about it because it was just too funny, as you'll see. So, this is right after Trisha flops on her bed underneath her bare light bulb. Trisha could still hear the doctor's words echoing in her mind. We'll do everything we can, but with treatment, perhaps 6 months. She hadn't believed it then, but she had finally begun to accept it. Leukemia. Such an ugly, awful-sounding word. It had haunted her most of her life, ever since her mother had died of it. Trisha had been 9 at the time, but she could still remember those dark, horrible days, the dim bedroom smelling of medicine, her mother's gaunt face against the pillow. Her mother had always been so cheerful and full of smiles, but in the end, she had wasted away to a dull-eyed skeleton. When she died, it was as if light had gone out of their lives, especially her husband's. I'd like to make a note that part about the skeleton eye thing is a popular highlight in the Kindle version of this book.
That's so weird.
What the fuck, readers?
That's so weird. Oh, that's
so I actually have a whole bunch more highlighted because it goes on from there. Yeah. But this is actually significant backstory to the Martin family. And I'm going to give the writer of the book some credit. Yeah,
because it explains why the father's an alcoholic, why the sister has no direction.
Turns out, Dad didn't even really start drinking until the mom died. Yeah. And he looks at the mom's photos a lot, and Trisha says later on in the book that her dad and her sister are basically in denial about the fact that she's dying and are still talking about what they're going to do to cure her. Trisha, on the other hand, has totally given up and is sure that she's going to die. She seems to have some sort of like supernatural kind of knowledge, which is a thing that happens sometimes, I think, with people.
It's also a thing that's very popular in fiction in general. Like, anytime a character knows they're going to die, that character kind of becomes, like, magical. It just turns into that character becomes like, oh, they're just like aware of things and they're just so much like deeper and more in touch with things. And like, you know, a lot of that's total just fiction and magic on top of whatever. But I mean, to a certain degree, I think just, you know, when you go through health stuff anyways, like even if you don't die from it or even if it's not fatal or whatever, you do become very introspective and you examine things and you walk away from it thinking like, I have insight on things that maybe other people don't.
Yeah. I think that was believable, even though there was no real talk in the book of Trisha ever having tried to combat it. Like, did she do anything to but, you know.
Also, I think I think the issue would be like how long she's had it for. Like, I think if we're gonna touch on anything, it's very obvious that I'm going to mention The Fault in Our Stars. Like, that was going to happen.
Please.
But, you know, her character and, you know, the main character in Fault are in a similar place kind of emotionally, but the main character in The Fault in Our Stars has had cancer for years, and she has been basically stage 4 for years. Whereas, like, this girl, it's like, it's brand new. And she just seemed to, like, immediately be like, yep, that's it. Okay, I'm done.
Well, I mean, if we're going to get real about this, which I guess why not?
Yeah.
I mean, listeners probably are not aware. My own mother died of cancer when I was 15. And she died of a rare form of breast cancer. And while I hope to live a long and happy life, I'm realizing more and more as I get older, it's been almost 20 years now, that there is this weird little part of my head where there's a part of me that is afraid that the same thing's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know how there could not be, but especially because of the way that it was, like, so sudden and unpredictable.
Yeah.
It was, like, that's something that I think has colored my entire life. Like, not just, and I've always thought of it as being the fact that I know what loss is, I know about death and trauma, like, that has made me have this, like, sometimes mostly good and sometimes a little bit bad, like, zest for, like, trying to get the most out of life and awareness of the fleetingness of life, which I think is good. But I always thought that was because I'd experienced loss. But I've been starting to think a little bit more that part of it might be because... And reading this book actually reminded me of this a little bit. So I guess it's maybe this whole experiment is more real than I realized. That part of it may be a little bit of me not fully trusting my own...
Longevity?
Yeah. I mean, I say that not... I'm not crying, like, I don't have this...
Yeah,
like,
I understand,
It's not like I feel like I'm gonna die, but there's a little voice in the back of my head sometimes that's like, well, this could happen to you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, obviously I didn't know you then when you were in high school, but when I was in college, my best friend in college, I watched her mom get cancer, I watched her deal with it, I watched her mom die within the course of the time, you know, and I watched her go through the same thing, and it was also breast cancer, and the idea that she could end up with it, and she could actually be tested for the gene, and she chose not to be, and still chooses not to be tested for it. She doesn't want to know, so...
Which I guess is all just to say, we definitely don't, I mean, not only to say, but among other things, we definitely do not, neither of us come to this with a callous attitude towards death, dying,
no.
illness at all. And I'm sure there's a lot more we could say about that, but instead, let's talk about this dumb book. So, I didn't know this was going to be a very special episode of
I think
Diaries.
the very easiest thing to go with is the ridiculousness of Jeremy Frank.
Okay, let's get into the
so many levels.
I actually kind of love this B-plot, as much as it's so stupid because it's such fluff compared to the
that's true.
This is the main story, but they're interconnected in this beautiful way. Jessica hears from her friend Kara Walker, who, by the way, is super excited that Steven is single.
You know, so Steven and Trisha have broken up, and Jessica's just on the prowl for her brother.
Yeah.
And when her friend Kara comes up and talks to her and just, like, moons over her brother, and she's like, oh, this is great, we're gonna put you two together, you know.
Got all the hot gossip.
Yeah,
she has
true.
Actually a lot of, like, housekeeping that's being done right now. First of all, there's a new family moving into town. There's already 2 rich families in town, but there's about to be an even richer third family.
Of course.
They're gonna move into the Grayson mansion or something.
Yeah.
Like that. And this is the Morrow family. The Morrow family, which readers of the series...
The Godfrey Mansion. I had that right in my notes.
Become major players in Sweet Valley. As you might imagine,
yes.
If you're a rich family, you're going to be important in the Sweet Valley High series. The other hot piece of gossip that Kara is having is that Jeremy Frank is in the hospital with a broken leg. Now, who is Jeremy Frank, you may be wondering? So was I.
Jeremy Frank is inexplicably the largest celebrity that they seem to, like, moon over, except that he's basically, like, a local news or, like...
He has, like, a daily talk show or something, which, Frankly Speaking?
Yeah, which realistically would have probably been on, like... either PBS or, like, you know, your kind of, like, local broadcast network.
Know. Maybe Sweet Valley's not too far from LA, so maybe...
But he's local. Like, they make that very clear.
True. So Jessica, hearing that Jeremy Frank's in the hospital and seeing stars in her eyes, and she also has the total hots for Jeremy Frank, who is in his 20s.
gorge.
Yes.
Beyond.
So at this point, Jessica cooks up a scheme that she's going to convince Elizabeth that the two of them should be candy stripers at Valor Memorial Hospital, because that is the way that Jessica's going to get in Jeremy Frank's pants. Jessica walks into Elizabeth's room and says, Jessica gave a huge sigh and announced, "Life has no meaning." That's her opening gambit.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, who really, like, is so over all of Jessica's bullshit and everybody's bullshit in this book, which I loved.
Yeah.
Elizabeth is like, what? Like, what's your deal? What are you talking about?
Also, she's the opposite of that in every way, because she believes, like, her life and their life is just fabulous, fantastic, and she's amazing and incredible. And then for her to be like, life has no meaning, is just diametrically opposed to everything you know of her.
I guess her idea is she's going to convince Elizabeth that it only matters to live in this life if you're giving back to the world, which I think is a great perspective to have.
Just not one that she has.
Not one that Jessica actually has.
Let's be clear on that.
She convinces Elizabeth and admits that part of the reason that she needs Elizabeth to do it too is because Elizabeth is allowed to drive the car more often than Jessica is.
Yes, which brought me to the point that they talk about, like, relatively that this family has money and that how fabulous they are, and Jessica, going on about how fabulous and fantastic they are, and yet they make mention of Jessica riding the bus home from school.
But I also think that the Whitfields are supposed to be kind of like upper middle class, even though their house is described very. It's just like compared to the Martins, they have a lot of money, but they have the Fiat Spider that the girls drive around. The family has probably 2, if not 3 cars already. Because I
feel like the girls should have had a car. I feel like financially it would have made sense for the girls to have
a car.
They just don't have it every day.
Yeah, they usually are driving to school in their Fiat.
Oh, okay.
At any rate, Elizabeth agrees eventually that, like, you know what, it will be good to give back to the community. Yeah. And they go get these jobs as candy strippers to the hospital. Elizabeth loves it right away, even though she was the one talked into it. Jessica hates it. And the book describes her first day, how she's in the maternity ward.
She hates babies.
She hates it. And the book weirdly describes it as, in this way the book does, where you're getting inside Jessica's head as things are being described.
Yeah.
But it goes from bad to worse. The first thing is that she gets handed a bag of dirty diapers to throw away. And then the worst is that she's forced to look at babies and pictures of them.
Yeah.
Which is like, really? Is that really terrible?
I also think a little part that I thought was, like, real nifty of them to include was that Elizabeth thought that there was a possibility that this was all about Jessica's recent fascination with Love Story, because they had watched Love Story together, and that Jessica just, like, obsessed over it and then proceeded to basically feign illness for a while on guys so that they'll, like, hit on her, like, take pity on her, and she would, like, fake pass out and get them to catch her until finally she did to one guy, and he was just like, "Oh my God, gross, like, are you sick? Am I gonna catch it? Like, ugh." And then she stopped, and I'm like, you're a ridiculous human person if you're doing that. Like, that's such an extreme thing.
Well, so Elizabeth, meanwhile, actually gets to go to Jeremy Frank's room. That's just the word she's assigned to. And she starts talking with them, and she's not Star Trek. She doesn't give a shit. She's just going to treat him like a normal person. When she reports back to Jessica about this, Jessica is livid. And she's like, I think I need to be transferred out of my ward. I think it's contagious. And I thought this was such a funny line from Elizabeth. Gosh, I hope it isn't contagious. You did say it was the maternity ward.
Yeah. Oh, God, I missed that.
Which was a good quip.
Also, there's a part right when the two of them are walking into the hospital for the first time that's the most dramatic thing if you're not familiar with everything that's happened throughout the course of the series, which is as they're walking into the hospital, it says, like, Elizabeth is reminded of the time she was in a horrible accident and nearly died and was in a coma for 6 months. And Jessica is reminded of Annie Whitman's suicide attempt that she was probably at fault for. And it was like, whoa!
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it was this moment. I always complain on this show about how there's no trauma in Sweet Valley.
Yeah!
But this was this one fleeting moment where they pulled into the hospital, and it describes them both sitting in the car silently for a moment, and like they're not talking about it, but in their heads they're both thinking of something terrible that happened at this hospital the last time they were there. Jeremy Frank is in the hospital. This is where, though, the fact that the girls are suddenly spending so much time in the hospital is important, because who else should be showing her face in the hospital but Trisha Martin. Elizabeth sees Trisha there, but she only sees like the back of her for a second.
Yeah.
And since Trisha and Stephen have broken up, she doesn't go talk to her.
She does like call out to her though.
Oh, that's right. And Trisha turns around and like looks kind of funny.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's all sorts of gossip going around about how Trisha is probably dating another guy.
And somebody saw her with a guy.
Kara says, I
think she talked to somebody else who saw somebody else. Yeah.
At the drugstore.
Yeah, she like in his arms. Yeah.
And Jessica is trying to plot to get Kara and Stephen together, and she is just like sure that she's going to make this work. She says at one point, now maybe Stephen can find himself a girlfriend from a decent family for a change.
Oh, Jesus.
And I really think she's like so dead set on like she's just trying to help out Stephen. Like that's how she convinced what she said to Elizabeth whenever she is talking about how she's trying to set him up with Kara, and Liz is like, Kara's all wrong for Stephen. Why are you doing this? Can't you see he's heartbroken?
Yeah.
And I believe that Jessica thinks that she is trying to do
I do think she is.
But two big things here. One thing, knowing what we now know about the Martin family, Jessica's attitude towards them and how terrible they are starts to feel really callous. Like, bad even for Jessica.
Yeah, like, I had, like, one person I was in school with growing up who, like, was in my grade in school who lost her mother. Like, everybody knew about it. Like, I grew up in a small town, and this is supposed to be in a small town, and, like, everyone's going to know about that. Everyone's going to, and whatever happens afterwards, whatever, deterioration of the family happens afterwards. And a very close friend of mine in high school, his father passed away. And, like, everyone around us knew it. Like, everyone around him knew it. Like, if the rest of his family had fallen apart, or if this, this girl that I went to school with family had fallen apart, even if it's been years later, you'd be like, oh, yeah, well, such a sad story. The idea that she's so judgmental about it, even though she knows there's this like deeper tragic story, is like even worse.
Well, I don't know if Jessica doesn't know about the tragic.
She knows about her mom.
Oh, that's a good
That's point. What I mean.
Oh, of course. She does. The whole town would know about his death. Yeah, but furthermore, putting all that aside, Kara Walker is supposed to be her best friend.
Is she like that? I wasn't clear on that.
If Jessica knows anything about relationships and, like, rebounds, which you would think she would know that she's setting Kara up for a huge disappointment. And that's exactly what happens. Stephen is really broken up about Trisha, and Jessica takes him to this party at Kara's house that she totally makes up and forces Kara to, like, party exactly. At the last minute. She gets, like, Lila and some boy to come, and they're, like, going at it hot and heavy.
And Jessica's there with
Aaron Dallas.
Who is very interesting.
Yeah, so we don't hear much about Aaron Dallas in this book, but just know, and hold in your heads, that Jessica goes on several dates with Aaron Dallas in this book. We'll get to it in the bonus episode, I think.
Yes.
Why that's significant.
Yeah.
And then Stephen shows up with Jessica and Aaron. And Kara's like, haha, people couldn't come. Sorry. That's Jessica's basically for sure.
I was under the impression or anticipating that nobody was going to be there. That, like, she was going to set it up and it was just going to be the two of them. So that when more people, I would have been like, I was like, oh, this is a little bit better. Because I thought it was going to be even worse.
That there's, like, some semblance of a party.
Yeah.
But when Stephen hears enough times that Trisha's dating some other guy that, keep in mind, Stephen has no idea that Trisha's sick. Like, no idea.
Yeah.
So he hears enough times that Trisha has been seen around town with another guy that he is just like, fuck it. This girl's into me. And he kisses her really hard. And dances with her, like, all angry dances with her.
But he's thinking of Trisha the whole time.
He starts going out on dates with Kara. So this, circling back to my point, Jessica sets Kara up for this because she's like, oh, you know what'll be a good idea? She's been trying to get Kara and Steven together for a long time.
Yeah.
Even though Kara is 16 and Steven is like 19. He might be 18.
I think he's 18. Okay. I think they say that he's 18.
Which is not that big of a difference.
No.
But, the maturity difference is not
well, I think it's more just that, like, when you're in high school, you think that's, like, totally chill, but the second you get out of high school, the second you're in college, you're like, oh, no. Like, and you wouldn't encourage another person to date somebody still in high school. And it's just kind of that, like, turnaround of, like, is he really, like, a guy that looks like him and acts like him? Is he going to really turn around and date high school girls?
I definitely know of a few exceptions of this in my life, but in general, unless you were already dating when you were both in high school, it's a little bit weird as a college guy to, like, go back to high school to pick up.
Do you feel most of them are, like, college girls? Yeah, this is great.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But, so, anyway, Jessica's setting Kara up for this disaster. And believe it or not, that's already, like, most of the book. So, but Steven is really upset.
But Kara is in her sexiest outfit, which is a Hawaiian print halter dress, to which in my notes I write, is that sexy?
Well, what's sexy about it is that he can see her back and that you can see the tan lines from her bikini strap, which is apparently...
Okay, but, like, who's like... This Hawaiian print is real sexy. Like, I don't feel like that's... Like, I would assume it would have been like, it's her sexiest outfit, which they say, and then later describe her sexiest outfit. And I was like, oh, like, silk dress, like, tight red dress, like, cut out, whatever. No, it's a Hawaiian print halter dress. So... Maybe it was the times. Maybe I'm judging it out of context of the times.
It was the times. I think that's pretty sexy. If you think of, like, 80s movies, like, I can totally see the like, lead character in an 80s movie with her hair all huge and big earrings and a sexy Hawaiian print halter dress. Yeah,
or even, like, if you kind of dig into, like, Beverly Hills 90210, like, the earlier stuff that were, like, still kind of in there.
Yeah, you could picture Kelly in one of those.
Oh yeah, Donna definitely. Donna, like Brenda wouldn't have worn that. No. But Donna would have definitely worn that.
I don't think Lila Fowler would wear a Hawaiian print halter dress either. So
no.
So anyway, coming around to it, this is the big moment now where I think that the author should have revealed the big twist that Trisha had cancer and was dying.
Yeah.
Now. Because Elizabeth is just doing her rounds. She walks into a room, and who should be there but Trisha Martin? And under the fluorescent lights, it's like without her big bulky sweaters on, like how could Elizabeth fail to see how like blue her skin looked and how sallow and
gaunt,
skinny, which is like true. Like how could you not have noticed that? But Trisha has no choice now but to kind of like confess everything to Elizabeth, and there's this weird moment where the book says, like, Elizabeth really admired Trisha, but she also knew that what Trisha was doing was wrong. Horribly wrong.
Yeah, that's such a trope, just like the, the misunderstanding, the, like, I'm going to keep this insane secret I should not be keeping, and I know I should not be keeping.
I guess we haven't even really made it explicit at this point. Trisha's idea, you've probably gotten here already, but Trisha's idea is that she can't tell Steven because it will be horrible for him to learn that she is dying.
Yeah.
And what will be better will be for him to find out that she was dying after she's dead, and it won't hurt as much because he'll be over her. It's so fucked up that I want to shake her.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's also... not even, I was going to say borderline, but it's not even borderline. Like, it's fully unfortunate that she thinks so little of herself and his affections for her that she thinks he'll just get over her and get over, and like, even that he would get over their breakup that easily and then for her to think that he would get over her death that easily is like, sweetheart, like...
It's really sad.
Whoa.
It's like she swears Elizabeth to secrecy, but she also is like, I'm glad you know now, Liz, because now after I die, you can tell him that I loved him all along.
What a weight to put on Elizabeth, too.
Yeah, and on poor Stephen, like, and on herself. I mean, it's like, I get where she's coming from, in a way. Like,
I understand that,
to put... She knows how much... She actually says this. She knows how much it hurt when her mother died. She doesn't want to put Stephen through that same, like, grief process. But you can't hide from that grief. Like, now, all that's happening... Like, once Trish is gone, she's gone. Like, Stephen can't talk to her and tell her how he really felt. Like, all of that weight of the things left unsaid, that's what she's leaving for Stephen. Not to get all serious again, but it's just like, this... If I have something serious to say in this podcast, the thing that comes up time and time again is this idea that if you have something to say to a loved one, you need to say it. Do not assume that something else is going on that you don't know about without talking to them. Because it's the thing that causes a problem every single book, is these assumptions about what other people are probably thinking or probably feeling.
I mean, I don't know how, like, far I want to go into this, but, like, to a much smaller degree, when I was, like, 18, I had a health scare. And it was something that was very, potentially extremely serious. And eventually, you know, they were able to treat it with medication and everything was fine. But at the time, there was this long limbo of something very serious could potentially be wrong with you, and this is what we think it might be, and it's not good. And so then I was kind of on, you know, to a lesser degree, but on, like, Trisha's side of, like, trying to decide, like, who am I going to tell? I started thinking about, like, who could handle it? And, like, well, I don't think this person could handle it, and so I'm not going to tell them. And I think this person will handle it, so I am going to tell them. And then you also just never know how people are going to handle it. And some people surprise you, and some people don't, and some people disappoint you. But I remember telling one person, like, oh, I'm not going to tell this other person because I don't think they can handle it. And they're like, how dare you? Like, give them the chance to handle it. You don't know, and just, like, give them the chance to deal with it. Don't shut them out. And that's the whole of this book, is her just not even giving him the opportunity to deal with it, or, you know, any of that.
You hit the nail on the head when you say that also what a terrible burden for her to put on Elizabeth. Yep. And it is a really hard burden. Elizabeth is, like, moping through school. Yeah. You know, her friend Enid sees her, and Enid is like, oh no, did something happen with Todd? That was the last time I saw you this upset.
No.
And she tells Enid, like, I have a secret, and it's not my secret. And this I actually thought was a really good lesson. Like, there are so many bad lessons that teenagers can glean from these books.
No, yeah.
But I think that there's a really good lesson in here in the way that Enid
I wrote down the exact quote she says, though, because I thought it was a little blatant and ridiculous, where she says, what's wrong? And she says, I can't. It's a secret. And I promised I wouldn't tell. Like, why say that? Like, why say, like, then that's just begging to be told.
Well, apparently she knows Enid well enough to know that Enid won't pry. And the book, I thought, was so sweet in saying, verbatim, Enid was far too discreet to pry. She only nodded in sympathy. She knew what it was like to have secrets. And that was what friendship was all about. Understanding and trusting, even when you didn't know all the facts.
Yeah, which is good. That's great, yeah.
That's so sweet. But then Enid goes on, it sounds like too much responsibility for one person. I think you need to talk to someone older. Can you tell your parents? Liz says, no, they're too close. Oh, Enid, how can I tell anyone? I promised. Enid slipped an arm around Elizabeth's trembling shoulders. I see what this is doing to you, Liz. You've got to tell somebody. Elizabeth sensed that Enid was right, but she still remained uncertain. Who, she wondered. Who can I tell? And that's the end of the chapter, which brings us to a segment of the podcast that is new, and I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Collins Watch 2018.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh.
I knew, like, who could she tell who? Who could it be? Oh, an older person that she can confide in?
Also, yeah, again, as you've discussed on previous podcasts, the idea of the trope of the hot teacher-student relationship, which, I mean, I think you can, again, track through almost every major TV teen drama had that storyline. And it wasn't until very recently, and I think you can pinpoint exactly, if you're a fan, which last TV teen drama did that, in which people went, no, it's not okay anymore. It's not hot. I don't want any of it. And, like, I'm just,
talking Riverdale?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Riverdale is the tipping point, which was that I think Pretty Little Liars was kind of the teen drama right before.
Dawson's Creek.
Well, no, that's what, like, all of them did it. Like, nearly all of them did the storyline.
Right, in Dawson's Creek, it was actually kind of like,
it was like hot and salacious. Yeah.
I never thought about
Dawson's Creek did it.
But let's be clear. Let's be clear here. Mr. Collins isn't having sex with anybody.
No. But I just felt that Ezra Fitz vibe coming from him strongly.
It's funny though, because literally this chapter ends, who can I turn to who? And I'm like, she can turn to Mr. Collins.
There you
turn
go.
the page, next chapter, she's talking to Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
And so, Katie, you don't know this because you haven't heard it yet, but in the last book, Mr. Collins was accused of sexually assaulting a visiting teenager. Did he do it? No. And we knew he didn't do it. She was a liar. She was a bad bitch.
Yeah. But I was going to say, there is an episode of Veronica Mars about the exact same thing.
That came up in the episode.
Yes. Adam Scott.
Yes.
Adam Scott plays the teacher.
My guest Sinead brought up that exact same thing, Veronica Mars. So it's another recommendation.
We're going to be best friends now.
So, does that come up at all in this book? No. When did Mr. Collins get his damn job back at the high school?
No, it seemed super chill. Nobody seemed to have any problems with him.
And in fact, Mr. Collins, the man who has just been accused of sexually assaulting a teenager, falsely accused, but still, that those things tend to stick with you. When he senses that there's something wrong with Elizabeth, says to John Pfeiffer, who comes to talk to him, "Be with you in a minute, John. Liz and I are going up to my office. Hold the fort until we get back, will you?" To Elizabeth, he said, "There's something I want to talk to you about. It's probably better if we do it in private."
Yeah, and also, obviously she spills everything to him about what's going on with Trisha, and that Trisha has leukemia, and it's, all of this stuff that's been weighing on her. And she's, like, sobbing, and it, like, basically tells you that she's sobbing in his arms, and he's holding her, and whatever. And this is, like, this may seem extreme to some people or whatever, but as the child of two public school teachers, like, teachers aren't supposed to touch children. And I don't mean, like, in a, like, illegal way. I mean, like, they're not supposed to hug them. They're not supposed to, like, because it's just, like, any chance of any, like, kind of construed wrongdoing, which just tells you, like, how different the times are.
I think we can chalk this up to the times a lot. But also the fact that these books don't care at all that Mr. Collins is sexy and is an object of sexual attention. Like, they pointed out.
Because it was made very clear to me that he was totally on the up and up.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah. I support Mr. Collins, and that's what Collins Watch 2018 is all about. Not just defending Mr. Collins, but me opening my own eyes to the possibly predatory things that be misconstrued that Mr. Collins does.
Yes.
So, before we close up the plot here, maybe we should circle back to Beeline.
Yes. So
super fun.
The Jeremy the local TV host that Jessica is obsessed with and in love with and is creeping on in the hospital as a candy striper, even though he is a 25-year-old man.
First thing she does is she goes to talk to him, and she is going to sign his cast because he doesn't need anything.
But because he's in the hospital for a long period of time for a broken leg.
Yeah, but he's in traction. When she signs his leg, she, like, falls on him and fucks up his traction.
Yeah.
And, like, really hurts him. And then she, like, a nurse comes and she's
And then she pours cold water on him when she tries again.
Yeah, she comes back the next time and clears things up and pours cold water on him.
Yep.
And he hollers in pain.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth and Jeremy come up with a scheme.
Which is awful, by the way. It's awful on levels of, like Elizabeth, like, you're better than this.
I have a feeling that the author of this book had to, like, go back and make Jessica say more terrible things about the Martin family and be more of a bitch in the book, just so that maybe readers would not mind so much how terrible it is.
Also, I wasn't necessarily under the impression that it was fully Elizabeth's idea and that Elizabeth was just like, Jessica always wants what she can't have. Yeah. And when she can't have somebody, she becomes disinterested in them. And that's the main point of this entire, the crux of this entire thing. And
Jessica likes the chase.
Exactly.
So as soon as she gets the sense that the guy she's chasing is into her and will, like, give in to her, she loses interest. So Elizabeth picks this up.
Do we know that Elizabeth told him to do exactly what he did, or did he go off the rails with it?
I think that might have been his own invention.
That's what I think so, too.
Tell us. So what does Jeremy do to poor Jessica?
He proposes!
Yeah. Like, the third or fourth time they have ever spoken to each other.
Yeah.
He tells her that he wants to marry her. And she runs away.
Is insane. Like, they've had, like, 4 words exchanged. Mm-hmm. They haven't kissed. They know nothing about the other person. And Jessica's just like, oh my God, this is great. Like,
well, no, initially Jessica is like, holy shit. What? And she's like, I'm sorry, I gotta go. No.
But she still likes the idea of him doing this. Like, she's like, well, I'm 16, I can't get married, and that's horrifying, but, like, oh, yes, of course he would want to marry me.
She doesn't think, like, oh, he must be crazy. She's just like, oh, I had no idea that I had cast a spell over him.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it makes sense that he would love me so much. And you know what? I will accept his proposal. She tells Elizabeth that.
Ugh.
And Elizabeth, who, like, knows what Jeremy was up to, they had a whole code language. They were calling her a hurricane.
Because she is a human hurricane.
Elizabeth is like, oh, Jessica, you can't marry Jeremy. And Jessica's like, oh, I'm not going to marry him. I'm just going to accept his proposal.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a baller move from Jessica. Like, she's calling his bluff, but also she's insane. So she goes to the hospital and accepts his proposal, and he's like, he starts laughing at her.
Yeah, he's kind of not a great guy, because in the book, like, after he proposes and she freaks and she runs out of the room, it's like they describe him as, like, laughing in a sinister manner and kind of, like, almost like tapping his fingers together, like, look what I did.
Also, like, what a fucking idiot this girl is. All she's done to this man is hurt him.
Yeah.
He's already in the hospital.
I mean, just like delusional, like, but it's also a teenager thing. Like, a teenager would see how that would track in a weird way a grown adult wouldn't. Like, they'd just be like, oh, well, I'm super into him and he wants me, so I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, you know?
This is the same person who says at some point to Kara about Steven, Kara, just dress up really sexy and nature will take care of the rest.
Yeah.
That's how Jessica sees things.
That's not...
Of course, Jessica ends up not really being fully wrong.
Which, I mean...
It's not about Kara's sexy dress. It's about Steven being jealous and trying.
But that's going to work for you in, like, a purely physical way. Yeah. But it's not going to work for, like, if Kara wants something real, genuine, emotional relationship, it's not going to work out.
We didn't even mention how Kara and Steven go to this college party together, and she's really, like, trying to be so sexy coming on to him. And this other guy comes up to Steven and is like, oh, is this the girl you've been telling me so much about?
Is this Trisha?
Yeah, and calls her like, oh, Trisha, it's so nice to meet you. And Kara's like,
no.
Yeah. But anyway, Kara's like, if we're going to be in a relationship together, you need to stop thinking about Trisha. And Steven's like, relationship?
I was like, I'm sorry. Have they gone on, like, one date to her party and that's it?
Yeah.
I was not clear on how much time had passed. Well, I think it was a little while, because they mentioned something about the amount of time of, like, Elizabeth sitting with her secret about Trisha.
Oh, that's true. And
I
also
think
Steven
she sat with it for like maybe they said like a month or so or something.
Really? Well,
I want to say maybe, yeah.
But Steven also only comes home on the weekend, so how many times could they have seen each other?
But then at one point when they're doing the dialogue about the party, it's like a weeknight and he's home doing homework, and I was like, he's in college. What? Because she says to him like, the party's on Friday or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
true.
And I'm like, that's weird. He's in college.
Well, anyway, all of our like opening our hearts and pouring them into the sound waves has made us run super long, so we might as well wrap up the tale by saying that Elizabeth, on the advice of Mr. Collins, who's like, you need to trust your instincts here. If you really think that Trisha is making a mistake by keeping this a secret, and you really think you need to tell your brother, then I think you need to tell your brother. And she tells Steven, she says, Trisha's going to be so mad at me because she swore me to secrecy, but Steven, of course, is... wants to know. I mean,
and he devastated.
Runs back to Martian's house. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Martin's house. Yeah,
and
she tells him, and her telling him is just like unbelievably just like mushy and romantic and just fantastical and epic romance type. She says, that he'll just get past it, and he says, I could never be free of loving you. And they mention her describing that she wants Steven again because she wants to feel the warmth of his love, and she'll never be warm again. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, and she explains that the man in the drugstore, she basically fainted and he caught her. Yeah. Which I kind of had a feeling that's what happened. Although I've read this book before, so maybe I just remembered.
And I'll never stop loving you even when you're gone. That's just
this book does
beautiful.
A lot of forever.
I
love you forever. And Trisha hasn't had a new definition of what forever meant. But,
this chapter extremely epic.
I love you, she whispered once again. Don't ever forget that. Steven knew he wouldn't. Part of Trisha would stay with him for the rest of his life. I'm sure that's true.
Her love is like the wind. A walk to remember.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
He couldn't see it, but he could always feel it.
This book was probably a major influence on A Walk to Remember.
Nicholas Sparks, man. He was probably just sitting around reading Sweet Valley High books and was like, I am going to take off on this.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is, now that we've gotten through all that, there is another big element of the story that comes up, kind of closes things out in chapter 15. In order to talk about it, we need to adjourn to the section of the podcast where we talk about boys.
Oh, I don't want to ruin it with this.
Beautiful boys. I'm in danger of losing my head.
Okay, so there are some good boys to talk about in this book. I want to talk about Stephen Wakefield a little bit.
Also, I'm a big fan of this section. I love it when the little song plays and they're like, it's time for the boys talk. So, as a fan of the podcast, I'm very excited about this.
Well, thank you very much. I love it too. Yeah. Thanks, Jocelyn.
I had that song on repeat stuck in my head one day this week. I was trying to go to sleep and I was walking around my house and I was just like, boys.
Well, you should listen to the entire album. It's called A Witty Girl and it is on the internet.
So, maybe Spotify or something. I don't know.
Apple Music, Spotify.
Yeah, sure.
Wherever you want. Early on, Stephen is described, and he's Stephen is very sexy 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And we learned that the shadow of a 2-day beard darkened his handsome square-cut face.
Yeah. Do a lot of high school guys have beards?
When I was he's in college.
That's true.
But I remember,
just out.
I actually do remember being a freshman in college and looking around a month into school, looking around my human class and being like, oh, yeah, these boys don't have their moms around to tell them to shave anymore.
Or also, they're men that can grow beards.
Yeah.
And I was very into the fact that I just that sounds I'm just
not what I was thinking when I was in this class. They all look a little scraggly.
I just felt like none of the boys that I was in high school with, or all of the guys that I was in high school with, especially my grade, I was legitimately attracted to none of them. And I was just you're just all boys. You're just boys.
This is slightly off topic, but
forced metaphor.
Yeah. Only a little bit later, Jessica says to Stephen, you've been walking around here every weekend looking like Dracula's leftovers.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing to say. She also kisses him a couple times, like Jessica does.
Steven?
Yeah, I mean, not on the mouth, but like that's like a weird, like, you know, thing that. I don't know, like, I would have never been, like, to my brother, like, oh, because they said she passionately kisses Steven on the cheek. Yeah, they used that word.
No,
and I was like, what?
How do you passionately kiss?
They mentioned several times that people in the Wakefield family kissing each other in different, like, iterations. And I get it's, like, on the cheek, on the forehead, on the whatever. And I was like, my family wasn't going around kissing each other all the time.
Also, at one point, when Todd is talking to Elizabeth, he tweaks her nose right before saying something really serious, and he's saying, like, you're too sensitive for your own good, and tweaks her nose, and I'm just like, Todd, that's not a good look. Todd is pretty good.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to bring up, was that I was, like, super into the Todd character. I mean, obviously, Todd is supposed to be, like, the picturesque, you know, high school boyfriend, but I just, you know, and I look at him and think, like, oh, just, you know, Pacey Witter from Dawson's Creek. Like, I think, like, oh, he seems to be, like, I just kind of likened their relationship to kind of the way that they played out the, like, Joey and Pacey relationship. So
you think Todd's the one that's having sex with Mr. Collins?
Oh, that's true. No.
But, you know, Todd doesn't play
but the like, a little bit of, like, the humor, the, like...
That's true.
The kind of, like he would do that kind of stuff. The like, tweaking your nose and, like, you let things get to you too much. And,
so, one weird thing about this book, you know, they go into such detail about describing how everyone looks. Mm-hmm. But the book says of Steven that he is 6 feet plus.
Yeah,
so
plus what?
We don't know how.
Is he just, like, 7? A chill 6 feet? Or is he 6'7" and you're like, good Lord in heaven?
And then later on... we find out that Todd is also described as being over 6 feet. Like, it doesn't say his face
everyone's
over
just
6
like
feet,
over 6 feet.
Much over.
Everyone looks like water polo players, you know.
Oh, it says about 6 feet. Todd was such a kidder. His sense of humor was one of the things she loved best about him.
Yeah, man.
Plus about 6 feet of muscle topped by wavy brown hair and a brilliant white smile.
They have the perfect relationship, though.
About 6 feet.
Todd and Elizabeth have the perfect relationship. Okay. They're Joey and Pacey.
Well, so then there is one more guy that we got to talk about. Oh, no, there's 2 more guys. One is the father of the Morrow family. I didn't realize this, but apparently he used to play professional football.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So that's just a note for everybody. Note that down in your character notebook.
And Jeremy, of course. I feel like we talked a lot about Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy Frank.
Yeah, Jeremy Frank, of course.
Yeah, he's sexy broken leg man.
Yeah.
And then there's Carl.
Oh, God. Carl the orderly. I was under a very different impression about what was going on, by the way.
Describe to the listeners what's going on.
So, when Elizabeth is doing her, you know, dutiful candy striper work, she sees this orderly that kind of gives her a chill every time she sees him. And she, like, thinks maybe... I get the impression she, like... even maybe recognizes him or something. And she just feels like it's important, like, when she sees him and he kind of, like, locks on to her, that she kind of thinks it's important. But she's just generally, like, she's Elizabeth, and she's nice to him, and she's friendly. Not in an overly over-the-top way, just like a, oh, thanks, you know, here you go.
She feels bad for him.
Yeah.
He's described as being short and husky, about 25, with a hawkish nose and the darkest eyes Elizabeth had ever seen.
Yeah, I was under a different impression about what his involvement might have been, being that she was in the hospital for like 6 months.
She's definitely seen. Oh, okay. So
I thought like maybe he knew her from before, and she's not remembering him, and that's why she's like, I should know him, but I don't.
That would have been much more interesting. Instead, he's just a creepy guy, and it's so sad because, like, there is a male character in Sweet Valley who's like. He's a little husky. He's not super handsome. Yeah. And of course he has to be the biggest creep.
Oh, God.
The word creep is used to describe him, or creepy, a creepy feeling. Like, almost every time he comes up. Yep. And every time it seems very, like out of the blue. Like, he just happens to be there again. And then, I guess we can wrap around to the end of the book.
I just deep sigh, unless you didn't hear me. Elizabeth goes to the hospital to pick up her uniform or to drop it off or something. I'm not sure. And then Carl, the janitor, meets her in the parking lot, and he kidnaps her.
He throws her in a van that has a mattress in it, and he tells her, this is the only way that I can be with you forever.
And to, just tack on the end there, he, as do all kidnappers, seemingly for a very long time in movies and TV shows, he covers her mouth with a rag that has chloroform on it, and she goes unconscious. Because that's what you do in movies and TV shows. But as a, weirdo that I am, I knew that was kind of a myth that was debunked a while ago in film and TV show that, like, you can't actually do that. If you, chloroform someone, you would have to hold it on to their face for a solid 5 minutes before they would pass out. And then you have to regularly, keep a steady stream of, poisoning them with chloroform in order to keep them unconscious. So you can't just, they're not just going to inhale it and then pass out. That's not how chloroform works in, a real medical way. So let's just debunk that right now.
Yeah. So he chloroforms her, and, dun dun dun. Mm-hmm. Book 13.
A beautiful boys, a beautiful boys, a beautiful boys.
So yeah, that's this book. That's Sweet Valley High number
Jessica
12.
goes on his TV show.
Oh, right. Jessica goes on Jeremy Frank's show because he feels bad for punking her.
Yeah, which, yeah.
He should.
He should.
But we don't really get to see what she does.
What the fuck does Jessica talk about? If she's going to be interviewed on TV, normally you're promoting something or you're doing something. What is Jessica talking about on this talk show?
This book was pretty short. They really would have had time to let us watch Jessica on the show, but they didn't.
Or at least have her say one measly line about, what she's going to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what is this girl going to talk about?
What is the show even about? They didn't want to go into it. They didn't want to have to figure out what the show is about.
I could accept he just has a talk show, but I need to know, what is this girl going to talk about? I was like, Elizabeth could talk about stuff. I feel like Elizabeth could get on there and talk about the Oracle, the school newspaper that she's on, or her, commitment to candy striping, which she is very committed to, and just, being a good person. And I feel like Jessica would just get on there and be like, I'm going to be a famous actress, and I'm fabulous. She
could talk about boys and how to woo them. She could talk about fashions. She could talk about hanging out at the beach.
How to manipulate people.
She should have a show about how to manipulate people.
True.
People would watch that.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you a serious question.
Is it what I think it is?
Probably.
Yeah.
Are you a Jessica or an Elizabeth?
Ooh, so every time you ask that and I hear that thing, I'm like, no one's ever going to admit that they're a Jessica. Why would you admit? Has anyone ever admitted to being a Jessica?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So my thing would be that when I was reading this, I was like, as a listener, I was always like, oh, of course, I identify with Elizabeth more. But that was just listening to the podcast. And when I read the book, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm half Jessica. Because
tell me more.
Not of the, her just insane shallowness and manipulation of people, but her dramatics.
Yeah,
Her, I think she, at one point, stubs her she hurts herself in a very small way in the book at some point, and she kind of walks and is like, I'm bleeding, I'm dying, oh my god, and she flops herself on the bed and goes to her her sister and her parents and her brother and is very much just oh my god, you'll never guess, and I was like, oh no, that's me. That's totally me.
I think I would say you're probably a pretty good combo of various qualities. Most of the time when people say they're a Jessica, that's what comes. It's usually something I feel like I want to say I'm Elizabeth, but if I'm being honest, I'm more of a Jessica.
Yeah, and I know I don't have the Elizabeth, the idea that she's just kind of grace and quiet personified, and I know that I'm not any of those things.
Well, Elizabeth is actually is a little bit more awesome in this book than she sometimes is.
She was great. I love the stupid fake party that her sister set up. She was like, yeah, no, I'm not coming to that. I'm not going to help with your crazy.
There's this awesome moment where Caroline Pierce comes up to Elizabeth and starts telling her the rumors that she's heard about Trisha Martin. And Elizabeth just shuts Caroline down. She's so over it. Okay, so we can do a dramatic reenactment. Caroline just comes up to Elizabeth and starts, asking her questions. Caroline is an infamous gossip, worse than Cara. As listeners may remember from past books, including the very first one, where Caroline...
Yet somehow a great match for Stephen is
No,
according
that's
to...
Cara.
Oh, that's Cara.
I know, it's so stupid that they made these two gossips almost the same character.
That's ridiculous.
But Caroline is worse than Cara as a gossip and much less popular as well. So there's that sin.
How dare she?
So you be Caroline, and I'll be Elizabeth.
I saw you talking to Trisha Martin out on the lawn last week. Did she say anything about her new boyfriend?
I don't know what you're talking about.
She probably just didn't want to tell you because of Stephen. Lila said he looked older, so maybe he's a friend of Stephen's. Hey, wouldn't that be something?
Elizabeth turned to give Caroline a cold look. It's all a bunch of dumb gossip.
Blame it on Lila. She's the one who started it. She said she saw them together.
I don't believe it.
I don't see why not. Trisha's a Martin after all. I wouldn't put anything past a Martin, including going out with her boyfriend's friend behind his back.
This was too much for Elizabeth. Bristling, she confronted Caroline. For someone who talks a lot, you don't know very much, she snapped, leaving Caroline to gape after her in open-mouthed astonishment as she stalked off. Good, that's good gaping, but I just appreciated that. For someone who talks so much, you should don't know very much.
Also, that is definitely not a thing that anyone has ever said to me, ever. Or it's a thing that gets said to me all the time, because I talk a lot.
But you're not a gossip.
No, but I do like some juice every once in a while. I am like, ooh, there's drama? Tell me of the drama.
Well, we're going to get into some more talk in the extra drama episode of the podcast. But for now, I want to thank my guest, Katie LaDue. Thank you so much, Katie. I also want to thank Jocelyn Schofield for the use of the song Beautiful Boys that everybody loves. Go listen to A Witty Girl and her other albums. Thanks to you for listening. It would be super helpful at this point. I'm going to start telling you guys to do the thing that all podcast hosts tell their listeners to do, where they give me like a nice rating and a nice review and tell your friends on Apple Podcasts especially, but really like anywhere you want to give me a review. If you want to make a Yelp entry for me and review me there.
Yeah.
You want to write me some comments on sweetvalleydiaries.net.
iTunes?
iTunes is the main place.
Yeah, that you would write the review.
Yeah. So do that, and I would love you for doing that. I want to bring more people into the fold. I know you're out there, Sweet Valley High
I know
fans.
that Linda LaDue is listening to this
Hi, Linda.
right now. Will Elizabeth be saved? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 13. Kidnapped. That's a horrible hairdo. I mean, should I talk louder than what I'm just gonna do this, or?
I think you should, because I feel like you're gonna get louder than that.
Oh, because I'm gonna get like, well, this is whatever.
Yeah,
because
you have a set of pipes on you, Katie.
I'm loud. I'm biologically loud. I've spent most of my life listening to my mother tell my father, like, "You're yelling. We're in a restaurant. You're yelling."